Welcome to the Podcasting Mentor Podcast, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are ready to stop hiding and start showing up on the right stages without the burnout. I'm Candace Dudley, podcast guesting strategist, and your go-to for turning interviews into your favorite marketing and networking tool. And guess what? My podcast guesting accelerator is now enrolling for summer. Yep, this is your sign to finally get off the sidelines and into the spotlight. Like my client, Kelly, who landed 8 guest spots in a single week after we worked together. She called it a no-brainer and said she'd 1000% do it again. That's the power of intentional guesting, and that's exactly what will help you do. Let's get brave, let's get strategic, and let's get you heard. Head to the show notes for more details on my podcast guesting accelerator. Hey, welcome back to the show. I have a special guest. Andryanna's here. She's a mom of 3 boys, writer, speaker, educator, and the host of the Juggle is Real podcast. Welcome to the show. I'm super glad that we can connect today.
Hey, Candace, I'm so happy to be sitting here with you. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah, can you start by just introduce yourself, share what you do and who you help?
My name's Andryanna, and like you said, I'm a mom of 3 boys. I live the hockey life, arena to arena, rink to rink, and I really am here to support people in finding better balance, whatever that means to them, and in realizing that there's no such thing as perfection. So I had to learn it the hard way. Like so many of us, I was burning the candle at both ends. I was working 2 jobs, raising my kids, trying to run my household, somewhere in there trying to be the perfect person. And I was always coming up short. I was always feeling like I was failing no matter how hard I tried. I always thought if I could just manage my time better and do more, that I would be able to achieve all that I was setting for myself. And inevitably, it led me straight into burnout. So I had to find a better way. So that's when I started making small shifts, because that's all I had the capacity for at the time. And the small shifts that I was making was really supporting me. And so I thought, well, why don't I share this? Because I know that I'm not the only one who's going through this. I am not the only one. And I took to social media, and then I started the Juggle is Real podcast in 2021, just with the mission of helping other people, learn these very easy techniques that I was just, totally forgetting. And so that's where the Juggle is Real podcast stemmed from, and the Juggle is Real authentic self-care planner. And then the work that I do now, it's really trying to make the care realistic and manageable and doable in ways that are really supportive. And so, having meaningful conversations with people like you, sharing tools and strategies that help people find more ease and actually have fun in the juggle of life.
I think we might be living the same life, except for I'm traveling from basketball court to basketball court instead of hockey. I also am a fellow burnout survivor. And so I kind of want to touch on that first. How was your experience with that? And how did that really shape all the choices now that you've made in your life?
Well, if I could paint you a bit of a picture, at the time I had 2 children. It was 2017. Like I had mentioned, I was trying to be the perfect everything. And so I was working in a pretty demanding career. I worked in advertising and marketing. There was pretty long hours. I also really wanted to teach. And so I had a part-time teaching role at the college where I live, teaching 1 course a week. And I just figured if I could just keep trying harder, then everything will get easier. But it ended up getting harder and harder. And so for me, it really was what I thought was a very low point in my life, ended up being this beautiful awakening, because it made me realize that trying harder doesn't work. And I had to make things easier on myself. And it really was at first just like a mindset shift that, I'm only one person and I can't do everything, and allowing myself to be supported in the small ways. I have a wonderful family, and they live near where I live, and they would often offer support, and I would say no. And I would think, well, I should be able to do this. And I've learned now, having 3 children and now moving through in my journey, the people who are there to support you, whether it's friends or neighbors or family, they truly do enjoy helping. And so just small things like saying yes to support, saying yes to myself, doing things, purely because I want to do them, not because I feel like I should be doing them. And then releasing the things that I don't feel are serving me, So I was the chair of the PTA, and I, was the one always baking the treats, and I was doing all the things. And I had to release some of those things so that I could be a more present mom, so that I could have more time to spend with my family, so that I could take that yoga class and do things for for myself. What I thought was such a failure at the time ended up being such a beautiful experience because it taught me at a pretty early age, I was in my mid 30s, that it was not possible to continue that trajectory. And now moving forward, I'm 40 years old. I feel like I have such a more positive outlook, knowing that whatever I set out to do, whatever I want to achieve is totally doable. And we can have all the things, but it truly is, what do I want and what can I release in that process?
There's so many parts there that I want to touch on, but just first with the mindset of just try harder, just try harder. Do you think that's from the generation before us and our parents kind of instilling that in us as young kids, that that's how we succeed? Because I know that's something that I've had to I call it unlearning. I've had to unlearn it because it's not serving me now. And it did not pan out, especially as an adult trying to add more, do more, do more. It didn't make it better, like you said, and it resulted in burnout and maybe some anxiety or different things like that become something you have to deal with, versus what I've learned then is if you would have just taken the rest. Another thing you mentioned was doing things you think you should do. And I want to talk about that too. But that piece, those things kind of all pile up on you and then become something you end up having to spend more time dealing with than had you chose something different.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm the oldest of 4 children, Candace. I'm the
Same.
only girl. Yeah. So I have 3 younger brothers. And I don't think, anyone was consciously out there telling me, like, Andryanna, just try harder, try harder. I was naturally, quite gifted as a child. And so things came easy to me, in terms of school and the extracurricular activities that I engaged in. And so I feel like just, subtly seeing things around me, the magazines, the teeny bopper magazines or the shows I was watching, I think it did absolutely perpetuate that standard that, this is what adulthood is like. And, I watched shows, where, there was the woman who was having the most incredible career and she was wearing these beautiful high heels, and then she'd run to the soccer field and, everything was perfect and she was baking organic meals. And, so I definitely did put adulthood on a pedestal, and I thought that I had to be achieving more and trying harder. It's funny when you say that now, because I realize, the reality of the situation is messy houses, and I'm in sweats most of the time because I work from home, and, I don't always get it right. And my kids drive me crazy sometimes, but like, that is what I want, right? That is for me, like, that is a beautiful life. And so I think it really was about reframing what it truly means to be happy for me and what I think a fulfilling life is. And yeah, there's going to be things on the floor and messes and different things that don't always go right. But instead of like striving for perfection, always falling short, I've learned to ease into some of the things that aren't as important to me so that I can really focus on where my kids are at and what I really want to be doing with my career and who I want to be serving and supporting. So yeah, it's a little bit of a shift, and I'm still not doing it perfectly. I still find myself butting up with those, tendencies where I feel like I should be doing better. And so it's just kind of like constantly coming back to it and reframing, and in the moment, just being like, okay, we got this, we'll make it through. And how can I make it a little bit easier in the moment?
What do you say to people if they do notice that they've been living maybe on autopilot, doing things that they think they should be doing instead of really what they truly want to do and create for themselves and for their families? I think a lot of times once you have kids or become a parent, like that really puts things into perspective for me. So I imagine it's similar for others. But when people notice that, what advice do you have for them for the next steps? How to sort of break that cycle of autopilot and just doing what you think you should. It can be hard to break from that because maybe you've been doing it for 30 years or so, doing what you think other people expect of you. Do you have tips or advice for if someone's noticing that and then what they can do next?
So often when we are parents and when we're moms and we're, juggling our careers and all the things in life, we really fall by the wayside and we don't even end up on our own to-do list, right? Because the list is so long and there's so many things that we want to accomplish and check off. And we feel like we have to be super productive every minute of every day. And so like a really pivotal thing for me in my life and in my journey was really just stopping and pausing and asking myself, like, what would I love? Like, what do I actually want? And it's so funny because it seems like the most simple of questions, but it was not something that I had asked myself at all, from starting motherhood into that journey into experiencing burnout. What do I want and what would I actually love? And that's what led me to changing my career paths. That's what led me to releasing some things that were no longer serving me. That's what led to, setting up some frameworks and putting some boundaries in place. Well, what do I love? It's not something that I think I should be doing because it's a trend or because I see other parents doing it or because, so and so said that's what a good parent does. Well, what do I want? And so stopping and actually asking yourself that question and then seeing what comes up, like what would feel good. I mean, not forcing it because some days are hard and more challenging than others, and that's okay. But I have really learned that the small little changes and creating little habits makes such a big difference. Things that I've learned over time, whether it's spending a few minutes in the morning to just journal, these things that we know, right? Moving my body, even if it's like after this recording, I'm going to go take the dog around the block and it's not going to be a 2-hour power walk, but it's going to be 15 minutes. And when I get back in, I'm going to feel so much better, taking a second to recognize what's actually good and like being like, oh yeah, like even on the worst of days where I feel like everything's going wrong, I still had, a few sips of hot coffee. I still have, a fridge filled with food to feed my family. I still have the cozy bed that I can climb into, even on what's feeling like the most challenging days. And so when I'm spiraling, I just ask like, what would make this feel a little bit better? What would make this a little bit easier? Even if it's just like adding an extra cozy layer, putting a blanket on myself before like I grab my coffee and head to my desk to do some work. It's just allowing myself to find what feels good.
Are you an entrepreneur looking to start or grow your business while feeling supported and seen every step of the way? Join the Aligned Business Collective, the monthly membership I co-host with Andrea Hansen and Brittany Williams, designed for entrepreneurs like you. This is your space to connect, learn, and build a business that truly works for you, while we hold you accountable with our weekly calls and on-demand coaching. Head to the link in the show notes to learn more and join today. Yeah, it's interesting because I think when you start doing that, or at least for me, because that's similar to my last probably 2.5 years of just kind of getting more in touch with myself and learning myself again. You can get really out of touch when you have babies and you're in like survival mode. So we think it's this huge elaborate thing that it would take tons of time, but I've noticed it too, those tiny shifts. And then you touched on this, but not having judgment tied to what your true answer is when you do those little check-ins with yourself is a big deal. So let's keep going down this sort of self-care path. I know you have a planner, a self-care planner. Talk to me about your take on self-care, what you think it actually looks like. I know there's this I feel like this movie thought of what self-care is, like a bubble bath and wine, and maybe that is sometimes, but there's more to it. What is your take on that?
I mean, just the word self-care, sometimes I think it can feel so trite and it's so overused. And for me, when I think to self-care, it really is just coming back to myself and doing things that feel authentic to me. And when we hear these phrases like fill your cup and doing these things, it really is that continual process of asking myself, what would feel easier? What would I love? And then allowing it in small ways. And so in 2021, my third child was born, and that was, heart of the lockdowns, and my 2 older children were in virtual school, and I was still teaching from home virtually, and I had a full course load. And I just remember realizing like I'm slipping off, I'm losing myself. And despite my best efforts, this is getting really challenging. And of course it was so hard for everyone in that moment. But I knew, because I had already gone down the burnout spiral, that I had to support myself in those moments so that it didn't happen again. And so I sat down with myself and I just thought, like, how can I commit to myself in small ways, in simple ways, even in the craziest of times? And so I created these 5 pillars for supporting my own well-being. And I just made these like little commitments to myself. Like I promised myself that when I wake up, I'm going to write my list of gratitude. Even if, the baby was up in the middle of the night, even if I didn't have a good sleep, or even if I was feeling grouchy, I'm going to take 2 minutes and I'm going to write down a few things I'm grateful for. I'm going to move my body, even if that's, taking a walk with a stroller, even if that means, doing like a 10-minute stretch before I go to bed. I'm going to move my body, for a minimum of 10 minutes a day. And just these small little promises. And I wrote it down and I created this little guide for myself. And I felt it was so powerful, just the action of writing something down, making that promise, that commitment to yourself. And then even if it's something small, like waking up and drinking a glass of water, when you do that, and when I was actually following through, it was like, okay, yeah, I can still do this. I can care for myself. I can support myself. And it was just like evidence in this like little piggy bank of like, okay, my like little self-care piggy bank. And like, it felt like I was filling my cup, even though it was like these tiny little things that were seemingly not really making a dent in the overall picture of huge chaos and a lot of busyness and lots going on. It meant a lot to me. And so I shared it. It's still a free download that you can get called 30 Days for Me. And I go through this process monthly and I make little commitments to myself, and I'm still doing it. I'm still committing to myself. But what I found is that these little things then become habitual. So it's not so conscious that I have to make the effort to wake up and have that glass of water. That is now just part of my routine. But what can I add on to it? Maybe it's now, instead of writing a 1 minute list of gratitude, now I do a little bit of a meditation and a journaling practice. So I've been able to continually add things on. And in the most challenging of times, I still have these ups and downs, and life is lifing, but I've been able to come back to myself through those small ways. It's been really helpful.
I like that you started it for yourself. And then usually along the way, you realize if I'm feeling this, someone else is too. And so I love that you took the next steps to share it and put it out there and let somebody else see it, because that's so powerful. We often think it's just us, but it rarely ever is. So we'll link that in the show notes too, so you guys can go there. Switching gears a little bit, let's talk about just all the hats we wear as moms and entrepreneurs. And I know that your podcast name is The Juggle is Real. And so talk about some tips or some advice you have for the people that are attempting to juggle everything.
I honestly feel that when we're in these very busy stages of life, that doing more is really not the answer. I think we talked about this. I'm not into the hustle culture anymore. Like, I used to be on that hamster wheel. And, when I got off, I realized, okay, life can be so much better when we're not in the no pain, no gain mentality, because that approach, we learn the hard way that it only leads to exhaustion or illness. I truly think that when we're in this stage of life, we have to feel and really truly know that asking for help and being supported is not a sign of weakness. And it truly can be our greatest strength. I used to try to do everything for myself, and then, it didn't work out so well. So whether it's asking for help, hiring support, delegating tasks, or just saying like, I can't do this right now, or putting things aside when we have more capacity, it truly can be a game changer. So whether it's career related or home related, children related, I just try to stay within that mindset of, what would make this a little bit easier and how can I be supported? And then I try to have some frameworks, some systems, some things in place that I can lean on that I find is really helpful. But again, it's really simple. Even in my business now that I'm self-employed, I like to do little things, like I still have a notebook. I still do some old school things. I like to jot things down. I like my to-do list to be written by hand, but I'm also using, new programs and seeing what AI has to offer me, and being open to being supported in new ways. And so the biggest system is really just caring for myself. I don't want to take on too much. I don't want to see myself back in that overwhelm and exhaustion mode. So it's just, carving out space for myself, coming back to myself, seeing, where there might be some busier moments in the schedule, and trying to find ways to make it feel a little bit easier. And then truly it is just like having the network and the support to be like, okay, this is too much, and how can I be supported? So it's up and down, it's back and forth, but having those things in place is really helpful to lean on. And then, letting things come and letting things flow, not feeling like I have to have control over absolutely everything. That's been really helpful as well.
I think control is such an illusion. It makes us feel better, but really we don't ever have it. And you learn that really quick in life. And especially throw kids and parenting into the mix, then, someone is sick, or you have to go pick them up from school, or school's canceled because of the weather or something. And you just learn really fast that the world keeps spinning and your to-do list really can wait. And so I think that's one thing you mentioned, just like what has to get done today, like what really can wait. And I also like to prioritize too, like looking at that list, that can seem so overwhelming. What things look exciting and what things are going to push your business forward or make your life better, and maybe just start there. I'm like on a smaller scale. Let's talk about your planner that you wrote. I think it's on Amazon, right? You went into
Mm-hmm.
that process of you had an idea, it was something you made for yourself, you utilized that, and then the process of deciding and figuring out how to get this printed and out into the hands of others. Tell me about that little workflow in case other people have ideas floating around their head and they're like, I don't know how to get this out there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it was pretty organic for me. Like I mentioned, I had that free download, the 30 days for me, and I wanted to support people in a way that could make it a little bit easier and help them to stay accountable to, the commitments they're making for themselves. Because I am a writer, I also wanted to incorporate, some short stories, some real life things to make people feel seen and realize like you're truly not alone. And, we are all in all of this together. So it was just really, how can I do this in a way that feels good, that can reach a lot of people, can be helpful and supportive to others, and in a way that is within my wheelhouse right now. And so using Amazon and their system has been really, really awesome. I will say they make it quite easy. This is volume 2 of the Juggle is Real Authentic Self-Care Planner. But when I was making the original one, I took to Canva, I created the layouts myself. You can search the templates and whatnot. And so I just thought, okay, how can I make this very simple, straightforward, something that I want to use, something that I want to do my daily check-ins with that I think could be helpful for others. And so I really did create it in the simplest of ways, using Canva, using templates, and having it available on Amazon. Now I have, since the original was released, I've hired a design firm and I've gotten the layouts redone and things like that, right? But it really was about how can I be of service and make it possible. And that was a really good outlet. There's a lot of information available online. So if that's something that you want to do, create a planner or journal or, even a book of short stories, you can certainly Google it and hit up the Amazon KDP platform. There's tons of, Q&As there. But honestly, it's like, just do it, right? Because I had this in my head and I've wanted to do it for so long. And then it honestly, at that point, because I had already had the idea, because I knew I wanted to help people, once I started and took that first step and like downloaded the template and it didn't take me very long to do, but seeing how many people it's helped, getting messages or seeing a review or hearing from someone, people that I, don't know, and people messaging me online saying like, this has been really great. This framework is so helpful. I see myself in your stories. Like the preface is just talks about the girl who tried to be perfect. And so many people have come back to me and be like, that's me. Like when I was reading that, I was in tears because you were talking about me. Like, how did you know that that's exactly how I feel? So I would just say, like, please just, if you have an idea or a nudge or an inkling, or you want to be out there to help, just get started. Because once you're in that process, like the supports come to you, the answers come to you, like it truly all comes together, but you can't get all that help and support and information until you start. So just do it.
I love that. Tell us what it looks like for people to work with you and what you have coming up this spring.
I'm doing some in-person workshops, which is really, really wonderful. I love speaking with people. I love connecting with others, and I love sharing this framework and the things that I've learned in my journey. So doing in-person events and speaking at different conferences is on tap for me, which is really exciting. I have some incredible guests coming up on the Juggle Israel podcast. I'm learning so much from them, and it's such a blessing and such a privilege to be able to share that information and just, trying to maintain the juggle, plan ahead for the summer and take some downtime with my family. Like you said, you've got all the different sports and things. And so we've got some cottage stays coming up and things that we enjoy doing. I live in Northern Ontario, so the winters are cold and snowy, and the spring is like really this beautiful reawakening. So it's trying to spend as much time outdoors and really take that all in.
Awesome. And then I think you have a free resource too. Do you want to tell us about that?
Absolutely. Well, the 30 Days for Me guide is what we went through with setting commitments within those 5 pillars of well-being, which is really, really helpful. And that was the impetus of the self-care planner that's on Amazon. But if you sign up for that, you also get 2 other free resources. One is to help you release the guilt and judgments that we often feel as mothers that we touched upon earlier. So it's a great framework to kind of find what's been bothering you or what you're feeling guilty about or what those judgments you might be holding of yourself. And it's a process and a short worksheet to go through and releasing that and forgiving yourself and then coming up with some new truths that you can move forward with, which has been really helpful and pivotal for me. And then the third resource is something to help you with the kids. It's a before school, after school, and bedtime tasks chart. I use it. I printed them. I have them laminated in my house. And it's just, these simple things that we can do. One of my kids is neurodivergent. And so having the visual cues, having that representation is so helpful. And so I figured if it's helping me, hopefully it can help you too.
Perfect. I'm going to go download the guilt one right after this. I feel like that's something every mom could utilize. Is there anything else we haven't touched on yet that you want to make sure we talk about?
We've been through so much. I think, truly, it's just a journey. There's highs and lows, and there's ups and downs. But when you're true to yourself and when you're coming back to yourself in authentic ways and just being there to honestly care and love yourself, I think that's truly the best path forward. And the more that we can do that, we're showing others like that it's possible, that it's doable. And like we're creating this path for others to join us on. And it's been truly, truly amazing supporting other people in this way and seeing them live their most beautiful and authentic lives. And so I wish that for you and for all the listeners as well.
That's a perfect note to end on. Tell us where we can connect with you.
I'm most active on Instagram, so you can find me at Andryanna G, ANDRYANNAG. My website's also andryanna.com, and I'd love to hear from you. You can join in on the Juggle Israel podcast as well. There's weekly episodes, and I have some great guests, so I would love to see you there.
Awesome. We'll link all that in the show notes. Thank you so much for the great chat that we just had today.
Thanks so much, Candace. It's been such a pleasure chatting.
All right, that's it for today. If this episode gave you a little aha or you're thinking about guesting on podcasts now, I'd love to hear about it. Screenshot the episode, tag me on Instagram at Candace Dudley, and let me know your biggest takeaways. And don't forget to come back next Tuesday for another episode.